Well, to find out how that rescue effort is progressing, I spoke to the Deputy Mayor of Christchurch, Ngaire Button, just a short time ago. Ngaire Button, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
It's reported that the rescue efforts are now concentrating on 7 key sites where people are still believed to be trapped. What's the latest you have on what's going on in those buildings?
There's not much going on in those buildings overnight. Rescue efforts have reduced over the night. We've had quite a bit of rain here, but we're still hopeful that there are some survivors in those buildings.
Some people earlier in the day have been texting from inside collapsed buildings. Are any of those people still trapped, or have they all been taken out?
Tony, there's all sorts of stories and rumours out there about what's been happening, and people in pockets and live. We've heard all sorts of stories. The reality is that we've only had one survivor rescued from one of the buildings today, and there hasn't been a lot of evidence in the other buildings that where the search and rescue is operating currently. So I don't know about the people texting. I don't know whether that was something that was a hope or was actually happening.
So are the rescuers... sorry to interrupt you. Are the rescuers working now in those 7 sites, operating primarily out of hope, with no evidence that anyone is alive?
No, my understanding currently is that the rescue operation will begin again in the morning. There's a curfew on the central city overnight, so we've got a big building that is the Grand Chancellor building that is on a major lean and leaning against another building, and we've had quite a few aftershocks today, and the fear is that if those 2 buildings go, or if one of them falls down, it will just be a mighty crash that will spread far and wide in the central city. So no, there's a curfew in the central city, nobody's allowed out. We've got media here within the 4 avenues, but once they leave they won't be allowed back in until after 6:30 in the morning.
It has been reported that the Canterbury TV building, where earlier it was said there was a 100% certainty there was no one left alive, is now the subject of renewed searching. That's been reported in New Zealand. Is that true?
My understanding that there's no searching going on at the moment.
Is it likely that searching will begin again in the Canterbury TV building tomorrow?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, the Canterbury TV building's very close to that other building that I said was at risk of falling. So I guess that will depend a little bit on engineers and on the aftershocks and the risk to rescuers and actually being on that site. There's a lot of things to consider in the rescue effort.
Is it clear now, or is it becoming clearer, how many people have been killed in this earthquake?
We know that there are 68 confirmed deaths. There are another 300 missing. We are expecting that the death rate will rise, but the 300 that are missing won't rise by 300. Some of the people are just not contactable by cell phone, or there's other reasons why they haven't been able to be contacted, but they're just ones that haven't been, that are missing but not necessarily deceased.
Now, there are some serious questions to be answered, obviously, about why so many relatively modern buildings constructed in an earthquake zone have collapsed. Can you explain why those buildings weren't built to withstand a major earthquake?
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I understand that and it's surprising to us too, it's not the older buildings that have caused the most loss of life. It is the buildings that were built in the 50s and 60s. The 2 in particular, the PGG building and the CTV building, were built in the 50s and 60s, and they have major damage. And the other thing is those buildings have survived 2 earthquakes, two major earthquakes, been inspected by our engineers and declared safe. So obviously something has gone wrong within that building structure, and it's not just a little bit of damage, they've just totally collapsed. So I guess questions will be asked about the building code. I know if they were being built under current conditions that they would be built to a much higher standard, but still, they have been inspected recently and declared safe, which makes us as a city all feel very vulnerable.
Well, obviously, and the question is whether those inspections were appropriate, because there were plenty of warnings. There were other recent earthquakes and aftershocks. So I guess the question is, why did the inspectors not realise that these buildings were vulnerable to a major earthquake?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, and I guess those questions will be asked in the fullness of time. The question hanging over our heads here in Canterbury is, are there others? Are there other buildings like that? Are any of our buildings safe? Where can we go where we feel safe? Where can we locate our businesses and our homes? Where can we walk down the street where we're safe? And in Christchurch, we were just starting to move on. Most of our houses, many of our houses had been inspected and assessed by the Earthquake Commission. We were starting to make plans for the future. We hadn't had too many aftershocks in the last few weeks, and I think we were all starting to feel a little bit more confident about the future. But now we're back to a position which is worse than we were on the day after the September 4th earthquake.
So would you expect that after this disaster there'll be a complete revision of building construction plans, and every single building that houses people in the central business district in particular will have to be re-looked at to see whether they can remain standing?
Absolutely. I think that will be the case. Very hard to tell though, and I guess the engineers will tell us in time, but I guess it's very hard to tell what all of the building and if a building's going to fail, how it's going to fail. And it depends on where the earthquake comes from. This earthquake came from a completely different direction than the September 4th earthquake, which is why we've had a lot more losses.
Sure, but finally, does this look to you like there's been a major failure of planning?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a disaster. It's a natural disaster. We have to obviously look to the future. We have to think about our heritage. Christchurch is a beautiful city full of heritage buildings and beautiful gardens and old character homes, and I think we have to rethink whether we can have those things, we can have the luxury of those buildings in the future. Our cathedral, which is our landmark building right in the centre of Christchurch in Cathedral Square, has been severely damaged, and I think there will be a will amongst the Christchurch people to rebuild the cathedral, but I'm not sure about the many, many other heritage buildings which have been damaged. I think we need to have a real rethink about our future and about how we rebuild.
Ngaire Button, we have to leave you there. We thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
Thanks very much.